Be Monday. We started back today. That seems like a worthwhile place to begin from. So just making your way into something that feels nice and supportive. And so as you settle into your back, onto your back, yeah, as you settle onto your back, let's think about taking some like really big, full breaths. Not necessarily like loud breaths, right? But really thinking about full breaths, going all the way to the deepest capacity of your breath. And then once you've established the fullest, deepest breath that you can create, think about how you can work towards fluidity. Fluid breaths are relatively easy. Full breaths are relatively easy. Fluid, full breath are relatively hard. And so, as you are fully filling the lungs, see if you can just make those transitions as smooth, as fluid, as natural as possible. And we'll give ourselves 60 more seconds just to settle into this particular breath cycle for the evening. Last 15 seconds here. And let's inhale so that our knees are in a bent position if they're not. So kneecaps point towards the ceiling. Arms can be anywhere that feels easy for you. Really think about easy, whatever that means. And then push down into your toe mounds, lift your belt line up, find a little bridge. Maybe we even bring a little glute squeeze at the top of the bridge here. And then we start thinking about not the shins forward, but the hips going forward towards the front of our mat. And then we'll keep that hip forward energy as we lower the tailbone down. And the tailbone's going to land, it's going to anchor us, lumbar's going to neutralize, reach the arms up overhead, palms up, and try to extend those fingers towards the wall behind you, not towards the ceiling. And then think about bringing the humerus in line with the shoulder socket so that we're not out wide, but we're really like 3 fist distance between the hands there. And then keep the torso as active as it is, hands reaching towards that wall behind you. Draw the thighs in towards the rib cage. Good core requirement here. And then feet come back down on the mat. One last time. We'll soften the arms and push the tailbone up into a nice little bridge. Should have some more shoulder space here, which should give us some more hip space here. And then we'll just sway a little laterally. Thinking about that lateral chain expansiveness, so the entire sides of the body responding to our movement of the hips here. And then we'll bring the tailbone back down to the mat. Let the knees fall to one side or the other, whatever side you feel most drawn towards. And we'll press ourselves up to hands and knees, tabletop. Hands and knees, tabletop. Fingers splay out wide. The shoulder girdle is active. We are feeling the responsiveness from our fingertips. And let's use that fingertip engagement to just curl and roll, rock, whichever. But you can't say both at one time if you're me. Sinking back into that nice little down dog. Getting our spine nice and long here. And then let's come down to hands and knees. Once again, we'll flip the tops of the feet and settle back into a child's pose. Looking to land so that the lumbar can be at ease. Yeah, try to think if that's the wrong way to describe that. Ease doesn't necessarily mean neutral, but think about neutral and then length and then how that allows for the ease of decompression, right? As we get the lumbar to be long, then we take off the pressure of that vertebrae to vertebrae connection or the vertebrae to disc connection. And that is what we're looking for here. And then let's plant our fingertips in front of us. If they're not already there, we'll pull ourselves back forward to hands and knees, tabletop. Bring your right knee in line with the sternum. So from kind of traditional, we're just bringing that in, and I showed that without mirroring. So think about right knee in. So right knee comes in line with the middle of the sternum. The right hand is going to do the same thing. So now we're a little asymmetrical to the left side of our mat. Push your left foot straight back behind you, connect that toe mound, and then ground the left foot so that you can feel that pinky edge. And then just open the left hand into this little modified side angle. So really, if we have the stability from the right side, all we're looking to do is get some length again in our torso. Maybe even extend that left hand out, palm down towards the front of your room, front of the mat. And then we'll release the left hand down. Bring the right knee and right hand back to its side of the mat so that we have traditional alignment. You may have a little asymmetry here through the shoulder girdle in particular. Let's try to balance that out by curling our toes and rolling back into down dog. I'm really into blending words today. So we'll just keep mashing 2 words together and let you guys decipher what I'm trying to say. Pushing back into that tailbone space and pushing from those hands so that you can maximize the spinal column length and trying to recreate that spinal column space so that the vertebrae get that from that tight weave to like just a little bit of room. And then let's come back down to hands and knees tabletop. And we'll take our twist over to the second side. So left knee comes in line with the middle of the body. Left hand, the same thing. Right foot pushes back. Right heel grounds. Right hand extends towards the ceiling. If we have that comfort, if we have that stability on the bottom half of the shape, all we're looking to do at that point is get this lateral chain expansion. Right hand can reach towards the front of the room to help make that possible. Palm is down. Again, it's the stability that allows for all of this length. And then right hand comes down to the mat. Left hand, left knee back to their rightful side. Curl your toes. Roll back into down dog. Get that space, that length, that pressure release. And eventually we'll walk ourselves forward to the front of the mat. Settling into your fold, letting your hamstrings release. Inhale into half lift. Big, flat, expansive back. Exhale back into fold. As you settle back into that fold, the entirety of our body just melting and relaxing. The head anchoring us down, like working with gravity to, again, elongate the spine. And then let's drift our awareness to our sacrum. We'll roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. Nice and slowly as we unwind our way into our top space here. Hands come together. Heart center. Now we can just breathe a little bit. Big reconnection to the fluidity of our breath. So we're thinking about those full, powerful, those full, nourishing breaths and finding that way to that same ease of exchange. And once you feel like you've settled into that breath cycle, once again, same breath cycle we had on our back, we're going to squeeze the glutes like 10, 15% and slide the left foot straight back. Hands stay at heart center, left heel grounds. We'll turn the torso towards warrior two. We're just not taking the arms out there. So squeeze the shoulder blades back and just think about this midline. Medial line opening, but midline balance right down the center of the body in the middle of the shape. And then let's spin that left heel back up, turn the torso back towards the front of the room. And then keep the torso towards the front of the room, ground the left heel. So we're staying with this midline alignment. We're staying with this mid-hip alignment, this anterior-posterior neutral spine alignment. A little warrior one energy. And then we'll spin that left heel back up, slide that left foot forward, sweep the arms up and overhead, and exhale through forward fold. This big, full release into your fold, really allowing for your body to just melt down into this fold space. And then we will drift our awareness to our sacrum, roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae, stacking the spine, doing this again very consciously, very slowly, eventually making our way to mountain, hands coming together at heart center, refinding that breath that we had when we started class, when I was less blurry. And then working on that interchange of inhale and exhale, that very fluid, very easy interchange. And from that fluidity, when we land within that breath cycle, squeezing the glutes and then sending that right foot straight back. We land, right heel grounds, hands stay at heart center, Middle of the spine is our awareness point. We take that big opening in the medial edge of the hips, but we're keeping our weight centered. Then we spin the right heel up, come back into crescent. Torso stays forward as the right heel grounds. We stay with the middle of the shape. The hips have that nice, smooth awareness. Right heel spins up. We'll step forward, sweep the arms up and overhead, and exhale through forward fold. Low back releasing into the bottom of this fold. The entirety of our body just getting that opportunity for stability from the legs, balanced stability into the length of the fold. Then we will plant our hands, walk ourselves back into down dog, drive that energy all the way up into the hips. And then let's come down to hands and knees, tabletop. We'll flip the tops of the feet and sink back into child's pose. Landing in child's pose. And breathing here. Making sure that each cycle of breath here is supportive, is fluid, is easy, is impactful. Let's give ourselves about 30 more seconds here. And then when it feels appropriate, we'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. Let's take our knees out so that they're just a little wider than the hands. And so if the knees don't feel like they have the capacity to get wider than the hands, make the hands narrower. Right, so knees are wider than the hands, but the hands can be as narrow as need be to make that possible. And then we'll take our feet out so that they are in line with the knees. So the tibia and fibia are running nice and parallel to one another. And then curl your toes and roll back into this little modified version of down dog. Now, there's a little bit more pressure on the shoulders here. Bend the knees and try to transition that shoulder pressure back into hip length. So easy to just bend the knees and drive back, and then let's walk ourselves forward into fold. We'll have the feet a little bit wider than they normally would be. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Keep the feet nice and wide. Sweep or roll up into mountain, hands coming together. Heart center. With this little bit of extra width, we're going to slide let's do right foot straight back. So right foot sliding back into this wider version of our lunge, right? We're thinking about how we can create this wider version. Note how that changes the anterior pressure on the right hip, and then sweep yourself up into a wider version of crescent. And then drop your hands to heart center, and we'll step forward. And we land here. Now we have little potential for some asymmetry in the hips. We're keeping that hip width. And then with that hip width as our kind of primary point of awareness, we'll slide the left foot back, landing in this wider version of lunge, thinking about how that impacts the anterior left hip, then sweep and fully express this shape. Again, this wider version doesn't change the anterior posterior neutrality. And then we'll drop the hands to heart center and step forward. Sweep the arms up and overhead. Exhale through forward fold. Settle into that fold space. At the back, receive. Let's walk back into plank. And from plank, we'll slowly, gently, delicately lower ourselves down to our belly. Let's slide our hands underneath our forehead for a little crocodile pose here. And so we kind of jumped out in this evening's practice at a pretty good rate. So check in with your rate of respiration, see if that has elevated, and see if it has elevated, if you can calm it back down. And let's just smooth out our inhales and exhales once again. We'll give ourselves about 40 more seconds here. So there's this Roman consul, and he is alone in this room full of masks of people. This room is an ancestor room, a room that would be ubiquitous across the entirety of Roman landowners. Everyone would have one. It's a room that is full of the death masks of your ancestors. When you're ready, let's slide our hands underneath our shoulders. We'll press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, let's curl the toes, lift the seat, and find our way back in a down dog. So we'll start from a down dog space here. Slowly tiptoe your way to the front of the mat. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Roll or sweep your way up into mountain. Hands coming together at heart center. Bring your right foot behind your left and let it come over to the left side of your mat. So we're just crossing the legs right behind the left. And then sweep your arms up and overhead. Exhale through forward fold. Notice how the weight wants to dump into the heels and shift yourself so that you're more receptive across the toe mounds. And then roll yourself up nice and slowly so that we end up in this leg crossed version of mountain. Hands come together at heart center, and we'll slide our right foot straight back at a traditional width. So hip width back to its side of the mat. So we just land, now we're just in a traditional lunge. Ground your right heel and stay with that medial line opening. Bring your left forearm to your left thigh. Extend your right hand straight out from the shoulder angle, 45-degree-ish, palm down. Push into that pinky toe edge of your right foot. Reach through the fingers. Get that lateral expansion. And then use your right oblique to draw yourself up into Warrior Two. Traditional Warrior Two. First time we've been in this shape with the arms. Don't lose the leg awareness here. So that left thigh still peeling open. Right hip still rolling externally. Right heel spins up. We are in crescent. From crescent, we will step forward to the front of the mat, hands coming together. At heart center and refining our breath. The delicate, fluid breath cycle here. When it feels appropriate, the left foot is going to cross behind the right and come down on the right side of the mat. So we have the legs crossed, left leg is behind the right, and we will forward fold. The weight wants to go to the heels, but we're going to shift so that it's in the toe mounds and in both toe mounds. Don't just allow the right leg to bear all the weight here. The left toe mount is active, push into that big toe. And then we'll roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. Coming back into our legs crossed mountain, hands together at heart center. The left foot's going to step back traditional width and to its side of the mat. So we land in a traditional lunge. Ground the left heel and roll yourself open into two. The medial line here is the important piece, right? So we're staying with that front leg peeling open, that left hip rolling open. And just at some nice ease here. Let's spin that left heel up and we will find crescent. Except that we need to ground that left heel and bring our right forearm to our right thigh. Left hand reaches towards the front of the mat, that nice 90 degrees. Just a little bonus crescent in the practice. You can never go wrong with that. Think about reaching those fingertips and pushing into that pinky toe edge of the foot. So it's this lateral line expansion, lateral chain expansion that we are actively seeking here. And then we'll draw ourselves back up into that too. There we go. Now the left heel is going to spin up. We're going to come into crescent and then drop the hands and we will find our way to the front of the mat. Nice work. Sweep the arms up and overhead. Exhale through forward fold. Grab opposite elbows here. Right hand to left elbow, left hand to right elbow. Rock a little side to side. Thinking about that thoracic joint, that union right in the middle of the back of the lumbar and thoracic spine. And as you're moving laterally here, just trying to unlock any stickiness at that point. Really focused on releasing any stickiness in the middle of the back. Eventually, we'll bring our torso back to neutral and we'll walk ourselves back into plank. From plank, let's slowly, gently, delicately lower ourselves down to our belly. And we're going to slide our elbows forward for Sphinx here. So elbows come underneath the shoulders, that nice 90-degree bend. This shirt makes it pretty hard to see, but 90-degree bend at the elbow. And then fingers splayed out wide, palms down, adjusting the head position with that extra little bit of awareness that you have at the thoracic joint until there's no pressure, right? So this shape has kind of the apex in the lumbar, but if you transcend, if the lumbar has the capacity to do this without compression, then the next kind of change point, the next kind of pinch point is that thoracic spine. So think about the head position so that the lumbar and thoracic joint are happy. And let's give ourselves just another 20 seconds here. And then we'll come down stacked Hands, forehead to crocodile. And so this Roman consul is just looking around this room filled with all these masks made of his ancestors, appreciating the lineages that he's come from. When there's a knock on the door, someone pokes their head in and they say, "It's time." And he gathers a few things and he kind of solemnly walks out the door. He gets in this chariot. And as soon as he sits down in the chariot, someone from behind him leans forward, whispers into his ear, "Memento mori." And the reason that is being whispered into his ear is because it is customary when Rome is holding a triumph for this person to be there, whispering those two words, "Memento mori." When you're ready, let's slide our hands underneath our shoulders. We will press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, splay those fingers out nice and wide, curl your toes, roll back into down dog. Get that length and space, and then let's walk our way forward into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Drift your awareness to your sacrum. Let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae, stacking the spine as we come up and find our mountain pose. From mountain. Let's slide our left foot straight back into lunge. Ground our left heel. Think about peeling open through the legs and then bring your torso down towards a traditional side angle. So we have the right hand here on the medial edge of the right foot. So nice vertical stacking of the tibia and fibia and that upper and lower arm structure to give that little bit of support. Take the left hand and extend it straight out towards the front of your room. And then roll your left shoulder up as high as you can so that we stack that torso. Push back into the pinky of that left foot. And then left oblique's going to draw us up into warrior two. And as you get to the top of the warrior two, it's almost like it's a force that we're too far back into the shape. Think about smoothing out towards the front of the shape. And then spin that left heel up. We'll find our way to crescent. And we'll step forward into fold. And just settle all the way into that fold space. As you settle, you're resetting the spine once again. And then we'll drift our awareness to our sacrum. We'll roll or sweep, your choice, all the way up. Coming into our mountain pose once again. Reestablishing the foundation of this shape. When it feels appropriate, let's slide that right foot straight back into lunge. And from that lunge space, well, we're going to do this a little blurry. We'll ground the right heel. Think about the hips being open, and then the left hand is taking us down, finding that stack, more traditional side angle. The right hand's going to reach forward, and that right shoulder is going to roll up, creating that torso room, that torso space. Thinking about the vertebrae separation as well. And then right oblique will pull us up. Warrior two. There's again that almost like natural tendency to be too far back, and we just settle into the full width of the shape. And then the right heel will spin up and we'll step forward and release into fold. The head lets go, the upper back lets go. Full settle here. Let's walk back into down dog. And make sure you fully appreciate what's available in down dog, and then come down to hands and knees, and then sink back into child's pose. So we can fully settle into the hip compression. We have now some additional torso length, some additional torso space, additional in comparison to the first and second time we were here, right? So core can engage if that feels like it gives you that lumbar elongation. But we're looking again to create that ease in this shape. And that ease from neutral length, softness in between the vertebrae. So structural ease, taking the compressive pressure off the spine. And let's just give ourselves 20 more seconds here. And then when it feels appropriate, we're going to pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, extend our legs out in front of us. And we're going to a seated forward fold. I'm going to let you be the determining factor in how you do that. So knees can be bent, legs can be extended, arms can be underneath the legs. Probably my recommendation, but anything that feels right. And then we're going to head into a fold. The goal here is to continue this sensation of spinal column ease, to continue the sensation of relief from any compressive sensation in the spine. And that's why I like the arms underneath, but you know your body better than me. Choose the shape, choose the fold that continues that sensation the best for you, and maybe try them all out. And we're going to be here for about another 90 seconds. So a good long hold here. So a triumph is a relatively hard thing for us to understand. It's a parade. But it is a parade of such import in Roman society that Caesar was once offered the option of having a triumph or being consul. And the Senate offered Caesar this choice. Consul, right, is like roughly the equivalent to being the president of the United States. The Senate offered this choice to Caesar because they did not want him to be consul. And they we're relatively certain he would choose the triumph instead. So this is a parade that has so much import that the Senate expected Caesar would choose the parade instead of the political office. Caesar, being who he was, surprised everyone and declined the triumph. Let's walk ourselves to a vertical spine, and then we are lowering onto our back. And so we're coming back onto our back here. I want you to really think about how differently the spine is receiving this, how the sensations have shifted from this first 3/4 of class that we've put in. And then just take a moment plus to really feel into and integrate into this new alignment that you have. And so this particular Roman consul is having this triumph. And he's coming down from his villa in the hills and he's heading down into the city, and the city is with people out to celebrate. And in a Roman triumph, the entirety of Rome is celebrating you, but they are celebrating what you have brought back to Rome on your military conquests. Roman politicians were the driving force behind the Roman militaries, conquests, legions. And so everything that you captured in those military conquests would be put on display so that the people of Rome could see just exactly what you had done, what you had brought back. That would include statues and art and golds and riches. And this particular consul was quite successful. He had lots of things to show off. Let's bring the bottoms of the feet together and let the knees fall out wide. And after every pile of gold, after every statue, after every piece of art that this chariot passes, that person from the back of the chariot leans forward and whispers into this consul's ear, "Memento mori." Last 25 seconds here. And things really start to pick up when they get into this consul's quests into Gaul. When you're ready, let's bring our knees back to neutral. And let both knees fall over to the left with an exhale. And inhale the knees back to neutral. And then exhale, let both knees fall over to the right. And inhale back to neutral. Let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. And inhale back to neutral. Then exhale both knees over towards the right. And inhale back to neutral. Exhale to the left. Inhale back to neutral. Let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. Inhale back to neutral. And let both knees fall over towards the left for a little static hold here. So Gaul is this area that we would now recognize as France and Germany. And the people of Gaul were absolutely terrifying to the ancient Romans. There are these writings, particularly by Plutarch, describing the Gallic people as these terrifying barbarians. The Romans used to call them the horde from the north. And there were very few things in the ancient Roman world that were more terrifying than the Gauls. But this particular consul had done quite well against their armies. Last 30 seconds here. You know, several successful military wins, captured of their finest possessions. And as he's going through these Gallic treasures brought back to Rome, he has this flashback of this particular route that they had of this Gallic army. The Roman legions had executed and set this strategic trap that worked perfectly. Inhale, will bring the knees back to neutral. And then exhale, the knees to the right. It had worked so perfectly that the Gallic force had abandoned their positions and they retreated, running straight back into camp. There are very few things in ancient warfare that caused more harm or casualties than a retreating army. But the thing that this consul remembered the most was that the Gallic women, their wives back in camp, as the Gallic warriors retreated, the Gallic women were so fierce. They started attacking their own husbands, their own men, as well as the Romans. For this retreat. And he's remembering back into this experience, and he's snapped out of this daydream by this voice from behind him in the chariot saying, I will inhale the knees back to neutral. And let's let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide here. He's snapped out of this daydream by the voice behind him, leaning forward and saying Memento Mori into his ear. And then we'll bring our knees back to neutral. And we'll ask ourselves if there's anything that we might want, need, or desire before Shavasana. And if there is, we'll offer that to ourselves now. And if we have everything that we need, we'll settle into a shape in which we can fully and deeply appreciate some stillness. The next set of treasures that this triumph has on display comes from this very incredibly wealthy nation state that this consul also had great military success against. And we're just fully finding our way into stillness. And so as this triumph moves on, it is this display of these Macedonian or Macedonian, depending on which pronunciation you're using. And all of these incredible pieces of art, these incredible statues, and also this king, this captured king in this little cage. So isn't remarkably uncommon. But this console goes by this king. He has this flashback memory to this time when this king was a freed and leader of this Macedonian society. And the two had gotten into a dispute. And this king was offered the opportunity to surrender peacefully and to pay a fee, essentially a 40% tax for this Roman consul. He said he needed some time to think about it. This consul took his walking stick and he drew a circle around the king's feet and he said, "Make a decision before you cross that line." And he snapped out of that memory as the voice from behind him leans forward and whispers into his ear, "Momentum. Remember, you are mortal." We'll start to bring some movement into our fingers and our toes, our wrists and our ankles. And every time the Romans had a triumph, there was always someone behind this celebrated person whispering in their ear. Movement up into the elbows, knees, shoulders, hips, neck, head. Memento mori. Remember, you are mortal. Up into your neck and your head. Because the Romans understood that no matter how valuable you were, how important your day was, how celebrated you were within Rome, you could never fully appreciate your experience without that conscious awareness of your mortality. Eventually, the entirety of our body will move, and through that movement, we will transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. And from this seated space, our spine will get tall, our breath will get fluid, and our eyes will close. And we'll inhale our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you be that voice in your head? Constantly reminding yourself that you are mortal, and see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this evening's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Monday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. I'll be back next Sunday to recharge, and we'll do this again next Monday. Have a beautiful week. Love the heck out of you. Mwah.